Start though.
Yeah. Mario, how's it going, man? Sorry for taking so long to get back to you. We've kind of divided the questions we're getting into two categories, informational and philosophical. The informational ones are really easy for us to knock out. You know, what's your favorite band? You know, we can kind of throw those out. The more philosophical ones, the more open-ended ones are a little tougher, and we want to be really intentional with our answers. So thank you for being patient, and hopefully we've got some good insight for you.
So to anyone who's watching, if you ask a deep question, it may take us more than one day to answer because we care.
There you go.
But if you ask me what my favorite color is, we'll tell you really fast. It's black.
Or, you know, if you ask us who would win in knee-deep water, a shark or a bear, we could probably get back to you pretty quick on that.
The Redskins would win.
So, Mario, thank you so much for those things you said. It really does mean a lot to have you guys encourage us that way. So thank you. And yes, you're right. We have heard of and we have read The Irresistible Revolution. We actually got to meet Shane Claiborne. He had breakfast in our house. So that just one-upped a lot of you guys. So,
He's always like a one-upper. Yeah, we read his book. He ate breakfast at our house.
So yes, the answer to that question is yes. And we did start something similar to kind of what he was talking about in that book in Charlotte. And if you've got a couple hours, we could sit down and give you just a smidgen of information that we could give you about thoughts on that. And I think a dialogue and discussion would be a much better and more fruitful way to talk on some of these things, but we'll give you some of the main pointers that we pulled away. First, I'll give a little bit of wisdom that I got from a buddy before we did what we did in Charlotte. My really good buddy and roommate at the time, Chris Krataski in Lynchburg. He had had some experience with that in the past and was hearing what we were wanting to do. And his biggest piece of information was be really careful about being inwardly focused and be more intentional about being outwardly focused. And I don't think we really understood the value of that wisdom at the time, but we took it and followed it because he knew better than we did, and I think we're forever grateful that was the case.
It's really like if you start something intentional, community, and you're just all focused. I think a lot what happens with especially college age Christians, this idea comes into their head and they go do it, and it becomes about accountability spiritually and about spiritual growth. And so everyone's just inwardly focused and they're just on each other, and they're like, hey, did you read the word today? Did you do this? Did you struggle with that? What did you do? And it's just it's not iron sharpening iron. It's more like two swords just banging together, kind of like it's like trying to break swords. Instead of if you're arm in arm with a brother and you're serving, then those same issues come out naturally and you can address them naturally. So for us, it was like we just tackled what we thought was just the gospel in our neighborhood, any way to engage people in relationships so we can engage them in conversations with who their maker was and how he feels about them. Then being involved in that brought all that stuff to the surface so much more in such a healthier and helpful way to go like, hey man, you have an anger problem, or I mean, I see this weakness in your life spiritually, and then the person's like, yeah, you can see it when you're doing it together, when you're going over it together. So it's a much more healthy way to live, and otherwise you can destroy each other really fast.
Yeah.
If you're not doing anything together, if you're just like spiritually, like it'll get old real fast, and it won't really help you.
So we have one main point that we're going to get to. But as another piece of wisdom, just in a practical sense, I think the number one thing we had going for us, and the number one thing we can owe to its practical success, aside from God and the Spirit's leading, was the fact that we already had deep friendships and relationships, and just seeing other communities that start based on a philosophy as opposed to relationship have just struggled. And I don't think that's a rule, but that was extremely valuable to us, and I think it was the biggest reason, aside from the fact that I believe God wanted it to happen, is the biggest reason that we were able to do what we did for as long as we did. And
I say it this way too: we believed. Besides the gospel, we believed in each other as much as anything, and that just went a long way for tackling whatever came down the road. Was like, I already know what Jeremiah's going to do. I already knew it. It was me and Jesse and Jeremiah, the original Maya pick, and we just knew each other so well that it went so far. And we've been talking to other communities we've seen and we've known about that were based on a shared goal, even some that had worked out a lot more thought process than we did. We didn't have a lot thought out. We actually tried to have meetings the first year. We'd sit down and try to be like, what's our vision statement? What's our purpose? And those conversations were the most frustrating ones until our friend TJ was like, why don't we stop doing this? Because we're already doing it. Like, we're already loving people. Like, let's let it define itself. But the definition now I see was just in our relationships with each other, and that trust in where we were with our walk with the Lord was the defining that was more important for us at the season.
So the main point that we want to get to, and we have a lot of expounding to do on it, is essentially the number one question you need to ask yourself is God leading you to do this? We don't believe that this is the new way to do church, and that all Christians need to get on board and start creating these little community houses everywhere. It's just one way that God can lead us to be the church in a given community. So that is the number one thing that you need to ask yourself when pursuing anything like this. Is the Spirit leading me here? Because it's going to fail if not. I mean, that's just all there is to it.
And even if He calls you to it, you still might fail. And that might be... we just talk about there's a lot of value in going down swinging.
Yeah.
Everybody is has an opinion about why everything's wrong, you know? And for me, it's like, well, I mean, are they trying? You know, are they willing to go down? And we use the analogy a lot early on with each other about at some point, you just got to run into the burning building and rescue people. And maybe next time you realize, oh, we should have brought buckets, or we should have done this, or we should have done that. But you can only sit and think too long when the problem is so great. And I can hear the question in your head as he was saying, is the Lord leading you to do it? And a lot of you, it's like, well, what does that look like? And what does it look like for the Lord to lead me to do something? And so that my question would be, I had this conversation with people a lot, would be, tell me about a time God has clearly spoken in your life. And I think for a lot of us, especially in our late teens and early 20s, even growing up in the church in America, we haven't really experienced that yet. And so for me, you know, and for Jeremiah too, if I'm entering a big season and I got a question in my life, I'm going to get away, I'm going to get alone, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to spend a lot of time in the Word. I'm going to spend a lot of time praying. I'm going to spend a lot of time listening. And those are not cultural things. Like, those are not part of our culture, is being quiet and being alone. But, you know, if you're asking, well, how do I know if He's leading? My question would be, well, I can't put that into a scientific formula for it. You know, I'm not going to give you like, well, these three things, but I will say maybe it's the first time for some of you guys in your life when you realize you need to get alone and you need to listen until you feel like you have clarity on it. Because He might be telling you to go, and if you don't go, you'll be miserable. And even if you do go, you might be miserable. Like, He might say, this is exactly where I wanted you to be. But if you can say, well, I know He led me here, like it was clear, then you can put up with whatever's going on so much better because you know you're supposed to be there.
You know, we mentioned, you know, is the Spirit leading you here? And that's really a tough one because sometimes you don't know, as far as direction, which way the Spirit's leading. I mean, we know, you know, morally how we're supposed to live, and we know a lot of these things, but as far as like, should I start this or not? And you see it in Paul's life. I think it's a great example and has been pretty impactful in my life. You know, he's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, so I want to head west, so I'm going to start heading there. And the Spirit said no and stopped him. And he's like, okay, well then I'll go this direction. And the Spirit said no and stopped him, and I'll go this direction. And he just kept going. And after he started going was when the Spirit kind of called him away. And finally, you know, in a dream, God told him where he had intended for him to go. So, that's back to the burning building illustration. Sometimes there's a problem, I just need to go. And I'm going to be listening all the way to see if the Spirit has any redirection for me. But so it's that balance of, is the Spirit telling me to go here? And, at least doing something until the Spirit has a redirection for you.
Yeah, when I heard one guy say, it's much easier to move an object that's already in motion. You just redirect it. Mm-hmm. And so if you feel like the Lord's laying it on your heart and you start going after it, but you're listening in humility the whole time, going, God, this is what I see, and so I'm going to give it 110% of my heart, but I'm doing it because I think you told me to, and I'm listening. I'm listening so intently to hear if I'm off. Well, God's going to reward that. Like, He's going to speak to that. That's a humble heart that's submissive to Him. So having that attitude of like, that was something we got big on at college, was just sometimes we just had to go, and we had a sense we were supposed to go and we didn't know why. And the Lord would just kind of redirect us on the way. But that's a very clear picture when Paul gets finally sent to Macedonia. He knows, he's clear that the Great Commission is his call. And I'd say that so many people, especially people our age and younger, ask, I don't know what my calling is. Your calling is the Great Commission. Mm-hmm. Like, that's your calling. And that's 99.9% of it. The last bit is this much information. But the other thing I'd say is back to speaking about community, is I think, and there's a lot of books that talk about this, but in America it's pretty sad, but the American dream has been really, really tied in with the gospel in a way that most people don't even recognize it. Mm-hmm. So I'm always going to encourage people to take whatever steps in their own life they can to just do the gospel, to just do the Great Commission, to just live the truth Jesus taught. And I'm not saying that to demonize our American culture, but if I was in any culture and something had wrapped itself in so closely with the gospel, I'd say we need to try to rip this out. So when I see people making choices that are, for us, it wasn't fun to be poor. It wasn't fun for our house to smell bad half the time because there was so many dudes in it. Those things weren't fun choices. They weren't when we got bed bugs, that wasn't easy or fun, but it was worth it because, so I'm always going to encourage people to step on faith and to just engage the gospel.
Yeah. And I think we've touched on this too, but just to put it out in a statement, be really careful of relying on systems and events and programs, and just really building on relationships. Mm-hmm. We had very few programs that we were doing, and so people would always ask, so what are you doing down there in Charlotte? And we really didn't have a great answer other than loving people and trying to be intentional and really seeking relationships out. And what we realize is people just think that sounds like what everybody does, but really when we all stop and look, it's like, how many of us really do know our neighbor down the street, and how many of us have any clue what's going on with anybody in our streets? And that's really the sad part.
It sounds like I think people want it to be a thing, like you started a thing, it has all this thingness to it, you can define it, when really it was just a bunch of dudes who trusted and knew each other trying to engage one neighborhood for the gospel, and and hoping the Lord would figure everything else out along the way. And like we said, one of the biggest gifts He gave us was to be focused on the task at hand. It was a more healthy way of refining each other, and He gave us strong relationships ahead of time. And so, if you can engage people that you're already in relationship with, I think it's going to be better. And if you can be more focused on the task at hand instead of on trying to refine each other, it just doesn't work that way. It happens in relationship. Mm-hmm. I think those would probably help. But if the Lord's calling you to do it, you just need to go down swinging, man. You just need to go after it,
I'm reminded of, I don't know if this will be valuable to you at all, but I think it's a great illustration. Whenever somebody would come join our house as a partner and want to get involved in what we're doing, we could guarantee within a month to 3 months they would come to us one day and say, "What are we doing here?" Mm-hmm. And our answer was always something along the lines of, "What are you doing here? Because I'll tell you what I've been doing. Mm-hmm. I've been today I talked to this guy for an hour, and I was helping this guy do this, or any number of things." And I just thought that was always really fun to watch.
Because
as people came in.
Because, and I said this to someone yesterday, in the rest of the world, maturity is recognized by independence. Jeremiah's a grown adult, I'm a grown adult, we have our own place, we have jobs, we have cars, we pay our own bills, so we're independent, so we're mature. But completely opposite with the Lord. Maturity in the Lord is marked by dependence. So when you come and say, a lot of people when they do things like community, they want a job, they want a task. Okay, here's your job, do all these things on this list every day and you'll please God. And that's never going to happen in your Christian life. Because God's goal is always going to be for you to wake up every day and go, God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I know the gospel, but I don't know specifics of what, so here's my day, I'm going with you and I'm listening. That's a mature believer. But people would always ask us, what are we doing here after 2 months, when they realized that they didn't have a rank and that they didn't have a title and that they didn't have a list of objectives for the day, because we weren't going to make it. It's not that easy as a Christian. You got to listen. So,
well, Mario, I'm sure that created far more questions than it answered, but we really wish you well in whatever you pursue, and ultimately we just encourage you to pursue God with everything.
Grace and peace.
Grace and peace. Thank you.